While I liked playing the markets, I also loved playing around with my friends, whether in the neighborhood when I was a kid using fake IDs to get into bars when we were teens, or nowadays going to music festivals and on scuba diving trips together. I've always been an independent thinker, inclined to take risks in search of rewards, not just in the markets, but in most everything. I also feared boredom and mediocrity much more than I feared failure. For me, great is better than terrible, and terrible is better than mediocre, because terrible at least gives life flavor. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is well. I see a couple of people already joining on Bigo. And today we're going to do what we usually do, which is some reading. And we are reading Principles by Ray Dalio since we finished Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So we went through that at breakneck speed. And if you'd like to see the recordings of that one and learn more about Rich Dad, Poor Dad and get my commentary on it, you can find that on the YouTube page, which is the Passive Cash Flow Club. But for now, we're going to get into Principles. And we were just starting out on Ray Dalio's life, so we've only just started the first chapter. And this is the second reading that we're doing. And he was just talking about Northeast Airlines that he bought and that everything was going up. And it was just after World War II. It would certainly go up, the common knowledge held, because managing the economy had developed into a science. After all, stocks had nearly quadrupled over the previous 10 years, and some had done much better than that. And that's where we left off. Let's get into it and do some reading and some learning, and I'll share my ideas and thoughts as well. As a result, dollar cost averaging, investing essentially the same dollar amount in the market every month, no matter how few or many shares it could buy, was a strategy most people followed. Of course, picking the best stock was even better. So that's what I and everyone else tried to do. There were thousands to choose from, all neatly listed on the last few pages of the newspaper. And he was also talking about the fact that he ordered a whole stack of reports from these companies so he could do his research on them. And the mailman hated him. While I liked playing the markets, I also loved playing around with my friends, whether in the neighborhood when I was a kid using fake IDs to get into bars when we were teens, or nowadays going to music festivals and on scuba diving trips together. I've always been an independent thinker, inclined to take risks in search of rewards, not just in the markets, but in most everything. I also feared boredom and mediocrity much more than I feared failure. For me, great is better than terrible, and terrible is better than mediocre, because terrible at least gives life flavor. The high school yearbook quote my friends chose for me was from Thoreau. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. So I'll definitely agree with that. It is better to make mistakes and go through life doing things differently to everybody else, unless those other people are doing something that would also bring you great joy and happiness. But if it is going to not do that, then make sure that you play to your own drumbeat and do what makes you feel happy and what brings you joy. Because if there's only one life that we have to live, then it is going to be sad if we don't do what we want with it. It's going to be sad if we don't achieve things that are going to bring us joy and happiness. And this is one of the regrets of the dying. So there was an Australian nurse, I think her surname was Weir. I don't remember her first name. And she actually spoke because she did palliative care, which is just before people die when you're in hospital. She was a nurse that looked after the people that were just waiting to die, who only had a couple of weeks or months left to live. And she asked them what their regrets were. And one of their regrets was not living their own life, doing what other people told them to do, living according to the dreams and goals that other people had for them. So that is something to absolutely avoid. In 1966, my senior year of high school, the stock market was still booming and I was making money and having a blast, cutting school with my best friend Phil to go surfing and doing what fun-loving high school boys usually do. Of course, I didn't know it then, but that year was to be the stock market's top. After that, almost everything I thought about the markets was proven wrong. Chapter 2, Crossing the Threshold, 1967 to 1979. I came into this period with the biases I had picked up from my experiences and the people around me. In 1966, asset prices reflected investors' optimism about the future. But between 1967 and 1979, bad economic surprises led to big and unexpected price declines. Not just the economy and the markets, but social sentiment deteriorated as well. Living through that taught me that while almost everyone expects the future to be a slightly modified version of the present, it is usually very different. But I didn't know that in 1967. Certain that stocks would eventually rebound, I kept buying them, even as the market fell, and I lost money until I figured out what was going wrong and how to deal with it. I gradually learned that prices reflect people's expectations, so they go up when actual results are better than expected, and they go down when they are worse than expected. So even when results are still positive, if they are worse than expected, so even if a company still makes 9% return, but they were expecting 12, the stock market will be a cruel partner to that company and will make it usually go down, which is just so fascinating. So the stock market, very much a game of psychology and mentality and what the masses are doing. If that is something that's interesting to you, that is something that you can use to be able to understand it a little bit more. And most people tend to be biased by their recent experiences. That fall, I started at a local college, CW Post. I got in on probation because of my C average in high school, probably too much skipping class and going surfing. But unlike high school, I loved college because I could learn about things that interested me, not because I had to. So I got great grades. I also loved living away from home and having independence. Learning to meditate helped too. When the Beatles visited India in 1968 to study transcendental meditation as the ashram of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, I was curious to learn it, so I did. I loved it. Meditation has benefited me hugely throughout my life because it produces a calm, open-mindedness that allows me to think more clearly and creatively. I majored in finance in college because of my love for the markets and because that major had no foreign language requirement. So it allowed me to learn what I was interested in, both inside and outside class. I learned a lot about commodity futures from a very interesting classmate, a Vietnam veteran, quite a bit older than me. Commodities were attractive because they could be traded with very low margin requirements, meaning I could leverage the limited amount of money I had to invest. If I could make winning decisions, which I planned to do, I could borrow more to make more. Stock, bond, and currency futures didn't exist back then. Commodity futures were strictly real commodities like corn, soybeans, cattle, and hogs, and they still are to this day. So those were the markets I started to train and learn about. My college years coincided with the era of free love, mind-expanding drug experimentation, and rejection of traditional authority. Living through it had a lasting effect on me and many other members of my generation. For example, it deeply impacted Steve Jobs, who I came to empathize with and admire. Like me, he took up meditation and wasn't interested in being taught as much as he loved visualizing and building out amazing new things. The times we lived in taught us both to question established way of doing things, an attitude he demonstrated superbly in Apple's iconic 1984 and Here's to the Crazy Ones, which were ad campaigns that spoke to me. So yes, it was a very interesting time, and each generation has certain things that are going to determine what comes out of that generation. And the times are very different now. I'm very curious and very interested to see what is going to come out of our generation. So I think that we are also headed for a time of a bit of turmoil, and we'll see what that is and what that becomes. But I was speaking to somebody not long ago, and we were talking about centralization and decentralization. And whereas the world has for a while been moving towards centralization again, everything being produced in China and everything moving to control by one particular entity, right now everything is starting to split apart again, and I see a trend towards decentralization. So something to keep in mind, and we'll see what happens with our generation and what kind of lessons we're going to learn from our absolute freedom, from the lack of freedom that we've just had. And it will be interesting to see how we take that on board It was interesting to see the generation after 2008 when the stock market collapsed and Americans started to upcycle and started to recycle. And there was an interesting article that I read a few days ago that talked about the fact that even though we were concerned that growing economic prosperity meant the depletion of more and more resources, it seems that they've done some research and they've discovered that the amount of resources being produced has actually decreased, even though economic output has still been increasing. So the Western world has embraced and come up with the notion that people want sustainable products and they don't want raw materials and new resources to be used constantly. And so our production of raw materials and our plundering and use of resources has actually started decreasing. And it looks like that trend is set to continue and that we will be recycling more, even though before we were recycling, the Western world was recycling, but it was all fake recycling. And a lot of the recycling still ended up in landfill, but we were putting it into boxes and collecting it, and it was made to look like we were recycling. But it seems that that has actually now shifted. And as China has stopped picking up resources from, for example, Australia for recycling, we have started doing some of that ourselves, and other countries have also started doing this. And this is what I mean by decentralization. So everything was all being sent to China, and China was doing all of the recycling for the whole world. And so because they couldn't take that much, a lot of it was not being recycled. But now, based on the decentralization and China refusing to take everybody's recycling, countries have started doing it themselves. It's decentralized, and industries are popping up that have seen this opportunity. And because they didn't have as many people interested in doing it, the middle class there was starting to see that they could get good jobs and good employment opportunities. So less business-minded people picking up on those opportunities. And it's now the Western countries that have their entrepreneurs who are picking up these opportunities. Bit of a side note on that one. Let's have a look. Where are we up to? For the country as a whole, those were difficult years. As the draft expanded and the number of young men coming home in body bags soared, the Vietnam War split the country. There was a lottery based on birth dates to determine the order of those who would be drafted. I remember listening to the lottery on the radio while playing pool with my friends. It was estimated that the first 160 or so birthdays called would be drafted, though they read off all 366 dates. My birthday was 48. I wasn't smart enough to be afraid of going to war because I naively thought that nothing bad could happen to me. But I didn't want to go because I was charging forward with my life, and to put it on hold for 2 years seemed like an eternity. My dad, though, was adamant against the war and hell-bent against me going, even though he had believed in and fought in the prior 2 wars. He had me examined by a doctor who discovered I had hypoglycemia, which gave me an exemption. When I look back on that, I see that I got out of serving on a technicality, that my dad was essentially helping me dodge the draft, which now gives me mixed feelings. I feel guilty I didn't do my part, relieved I didn't experience the harmful consequences so many others suffered from the war, and appreciative of my dad for the love behind his efforts to protect me. I have no idea what I'd do if I were faced with the same situation today. As America's politics and economy deteriorated, the country's mood became depressed. The Tet Offensive in January 1968 seemed to convey the U.S. was losing the war. That same year, Lyndon Johnson decided not to run for a second term, and Richard Nixon was elected, beginning an even more difficult era. At the same time, France's President Charles de Gaulle was turning in his country's dollars for gold because he was concerned the U.S. was printing money to finance its spending. Watching the news and the markets move together, I began to see the whole picture and understand the cause-effect relationship between the two. Interesting, that final little piece given that America, but not only America, the whole world has been printing itself into being able to spend more. So it will be interesting to see, since nobody is hedging their bets against a particular country printing like crazy. It is a similar circumstance, but also different, because now it is everybody doing the same thing. So there will be different consequences. There are different effects. But we can take some of the lessons from the past to start to see some of the bigger picture things that can give us some clues. So I'm looking forward to reading more. I'll share some more ideas as more of them come up. I hope you enjoyed this section of the book up until this point. And it looks like he's going to be talking about gold and what happened in 1970, 1971. And again, it is slightly different with that one because now we have cryptocurrencies. And whereas all money used to channel into gold when inflation was high and times were like they are now, a lot of money is flowing into cryptocurrencies. And gold, while it is higher, is not as high as it otherwise possibly would have been if all of that money was flowing into gold rather than cryptocurrency. And this is where generational influence is really interesting, because obviously we have an entitled generation that has been coming through, that has been given lots of opportunities, that haven't had depressions and other kinds of challenges and worries as much. Even the 2008 financial crisis did not really affect this generation as much as past depressions and other economic corrections have. But I've already started to comment on parts that I haven't even read because I'm so excited about it. So I hope you enjoyed that. I am looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow for another reading. As I said, these are recorded. And if you missed Rich Dad Poor Dad or The Art of Thinking Clearly, we have the recordings of those with my commentary on YouTube at the Passive Cash Flow Club. So I would love to see you there. Make sure you subscribe so that you can get notifications when new videos are going up, because we don't only have readings, we also have answers to your questions. We have book reviews. We have all sorts of different videos there. How to play cash flow, for example. So feel free to join us there and learn and find some really interesting things. Speaking of cash flow, we had cash flow last night. We had a really good turnout and some really great experiences and some great learnings from people that were playing cash flow. If that is something that interests you, and if you'd like to learn more about investing, and if you'd like to practice through a game that is going to teach you some real life things, then feel free to get in touch with me on Instagram. You can get in touch on Bigo, but it is so full of spam, it is really hard to find anybody there. I will follow everybody later on. But please do get in touch with me on Instagram, business_team_6_official. You'll be able to find me there, see what I'm up to, but also let me know that you're interested in cash flow, and I can get my VA, my virtual assistant, to send you the details of when we are playing next. And please also send me your questions. So if you are interested in finance, if you're interested in passive income or wealth creation, financial freedom, all of those different things, just like me, then feel free to ask any questions you have, because I am always looking for questions to be able to answer, make videos about, and put them on that YouTube channel, the Passive Cash Flow Club, so that I have a vault of various topics that can help you out. So if you are unsure of how to get into the real estate market, if you're not sure what a bond is, if you're not sure about anything on the stock market, or if there's questions you have around cryptocurrency or even NFTs, which we had a chat about yesterday, then feel free to reach out on Instagram. I love hearing from you, and I'm really, really thankful that you are here today as well. So reach out, ask your questions, let me know if you're interested in cash flow. And I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better than just reading and giving you my commentary. I would love to get to know you as a person, because I'm sure you have an interesting story and lots of great things to share. So I'm looking forward to hearing about you, getting to know you. But on that note, I'm going to let you go. Have an absolutely amazing day. Please do reach out. And I will see you all tomorrow morning. And I'm going to quickly go through the Bigo and see who has reacted and follow everybody there. So have a great day, and I'll see you somewhere online in another time and place.